Hello there, and welcome to the Sleep with Science channel, where tonight we are going to do something a little extraordinary together. We are going to leave everything behind, just for a while, and drift outward slowly and gently into the deepest, most breathtaking silence that has ever existed. So wherever you are right now, go ahead and let your body settle. Feel the weight of the day beginning to lift, muscle by muscle, breath by breath. There is nothing you need to solve tonight. Nothing you need to carry into this moment. Whatever was heavy, whatever was loud, whatever demanded so much of you today, you can set it all down now, right here, at the edge of the universe's front door, because what lies beyond that door is so incomprehensibly enormous, so staggeringly ancient and beautiful, that every worry you arrived with tonight will simply dissolve into the starlight. We are going on a journey. Not a rushed one. Not the kind that asks anything of you. This is the slowest, most peaceful journey imaginable, outward, beyond the blue ceiling of Earth's sky, beyond the familiar glow of our moon, beyond the amber deserts of Mars and the swirling storms of Jupiter, far, far past the outermost whisper of our solar system's edge, and then, even further still, into territory so vast that human language almost fails to describe it. Almost. Because tonight, we are going to try. Gently. Quietly. Together. Begin by closing your eyes, if they aren't already. Take one long, slow breath in through your nose. Hold it softly for just a moment. And then let it go. Feel how that single breath, that simple act of release, connects you to every living thing that has ever breathed on this planet. Every ancient human who looked up at the same stars you've looked up at. Every child who ever lay in the grass on a summer night and felt that strange, sweet vertigo of realizing the sky goes on forever. You are part of that long, unbroken chain of wonder tonight. Begin to imagine the sky above you opening up. The ceiling of your room grows transparent, gossamer, and then disappears entirely. The night sky reveals itself in a way you have never quite seen it, not filtered through city lights or cloud cover, but raw and infinite and crystalline, spilling from horizon to horizon in a river of cold, ancient fire. You are looking up at stars. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. And each single point of light you see is not merely a dot painted on a black canvas. Each one is a sun. A real, burning, furious sun. Some of them so enormous that if you place them where our own sun sits, they would swallow Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars whole and keep expanding still. The nearest of those stars beyond our sun is called Proxima Centauri, and it sits approximately 4.24 light-years away from where you are lying right now. That number might sound small. It isn't. A light-year is the distance that light, the fastest thing in the known universe, traveling at 186,000 miles every single second, covers in an entire year. So 4.24 light-years means that the light reaching your eyes from Proxima Centauri tonight left its surface roughly 4 years ago. It has been traveling through the perfect emptiness of space, in absolute silence, for longer than some children have been alive, just to arrive at this moment, just to touch your eyes. Think about that. The universe sent you a message 4 years ago, and it just arrived. And yet, in the grand architecture of what exists, Proxima Centauri is essentially our next-door neighbor. A stone's throw. A gentle stroll compared to the truly staggering distances that lie further out. Because our galaxy, the Milky Way, this vast, slowly spinning spiral of gas and dust and somewhere between 100 and 400 billion stars, stretches approximately 100,000 light-years from edge to edge. 100,000 years of light-speed travel, just across the neighborhood we call home. The human mind was not built to truly hold that number. And that is okay. You don't need to hold it. You only need to feel it. Feel the edges of your ordinary thinking soften and give way, like the shoreline yielding to the sea, as something much larger than ordinary thought begins to move through you. Right now, as your breathing slows, as the tension in your shoulders continues to release, our solar system, your sun, All 8 planets, the asteroid belts, the distant frozen reaches of the Oort cloud, everything you have ever known or touched or loved, occupies a quiet little arm of the Milky Way called the Orion Arm. We are not at the center. We are not especially close to the edge. We are simply here, in one of 4 great spiral arms, orbiting the galaxy's core at roughly 514,000 miles per hour, a speed so tremendous that it should feel terrifying, and yet you feel nothing. Because space is so unimaginably vast that even at 500,000 miles per hour, it takes our solar system approximately 225 million years to complete a single orbit around the Milky Way center. The last time we were in this exact position in our galactic journey, dinosaurs had only just begun to walk the Earth. Let that land softly in your mind. A single cosmic year, one full orbit of our galaxy, is 225 million of our human years. And we have completed approximately 20 of those orbits since our solar system first formed from a collapsing cloud of gas and dust, roughly 4.6 billion years ago. 20 laps around the galaxy. 20 cosmic years of existence. And in all of that time, across all of that incomprehensible distance, this small, blue, ocean-wrapped world continued spinning, continued breathing, continued quietly producing the conditions necessary for something as fragile and extraordinary as life to take hold and flourish. Breathe that in for a moment. Just breathe. There is something deeply settling about this, if you allow yourself to feel it fully. You are not separate from this story. You are not an observer standing outside the universe, peering in through a window. You are woven into it, thread by thread, atom by atom. Every particle of calcium in your bones was forged in the heart of a dying star billions of years before our sun even existed. Every iron atom moving through your blood right now was born in a stellar explosion so violent, so magnificent, that for a few brief weeks it outshone entire galaxies. You are not small in the way that sometimes feels diminishing. You are small in the way that a single, perfect note is small within a symphony, essential, resonant, and belonging completely to something far larger than itself. Let your body sink a little deeper now. Feel the surface beneath you holding you without effort. You do not have to do anything to be held. Gravity does that work for you, quietly and continuously, the same fundamental force that holds planets in their orbits, that keeps stars from flying apart into the dark, that curves the very fabric of space-time around massive objects in ways that still leave physicists breathless. Gravity is ancient and patient, and it has never once let go of you, not for a single moment of your life. Now let your awareness drift upward again, back to that open, star-filled sky above you. We were speaking of the Milky Way, our home galaxy, that slow, majestic spiral of hundreds of billions of stars. But here is where the scale of things begins to truly shift beneath your feet, like the floor of the universe tilting gently to reveal something even deeper below. Because the Milky Way, for all its breathtaking enormity, is not alone. Not remotely. Our galaxy has companions. The Large and Small Magellanic Clouds are 2 irregular dwarf galaxies, visible from Earth's southern hemisphere as soft, luminous smudges against the night sky, and they are gravitationally bound to us, traveling with us through space the way 2 small boats might trail behind an ocean liner. The Large Magellanic Cloud sits approximately 160,000 light-years away. The Small Magellanic Cloud, a little further, at around 200,000 light-years. They have been our companions for billions of years, these 2 small, glowing satellites, quietly orbiting as we all move together through the larger architecture of what cosmologists call the local group. The local group. Even the name has a warmth to it, a neighborliness, as though the universe arranged its galaxies into something like a community. And in a sense, it did. The local group is a gravitationally bound collection of more than 50 galaxies, spread across a region of space roughly 10 million light-years in diameter. 10 million light-years. And within this group, there are 2 dominant presences, our own Milky Way, and the Andromeda Galaxy, also known as Messier 31, the largest galaxy in our local neighborhood, sitting approximately 2.537 million light-years away from where you are resting right now. Andromeda is extraordinary. On a clear, moonless night, far from city lights, it is actually visible to the naked human eye, a faint, elongated smudge of ancient light in the constellation of the same name. That soft blur of light is not a single star. It is an entire galaxy, home to somewhere between 1 trillion and 1 trillion stars, more than twice the stellar population of our own Milky Way. And the light reaching your eyes from Andromeda on such a clear night left its source 2.537 million years ago. Long before modern humans existed, long before our ancestors had developed language or fire or the capacity to look up and wonder at what they were seeing. The universe, you see, is also a kind of time machine. Every time you look at the night sky, you are not seeing the universe as it is. You are seeing it as it was, at different moments in the past, layered on top of one another like transparencies, each more ancient than the last. The moon you see is 1.3 light seconds away, meaning you see it as it was just over a second ago. The sun you see each morning left its source 8 minutes and 20 seconds before it reaches your eyes. The stars of our galaxy range from a few light-years to tens of thousands of light-years in their distance. And Andromeda, that faint smudge visible to the unaided eye, shows you a moment from before our own species had learned to stand fully upright on 2 feet. The universe has been sending us these light messages across millions and billions of years, and we, in our brief, bright flicker of conscious existence, have only just recently developed the instruments and the understanding to begin reading them. And what those messages tell us is simultaneously the most humbling and the most magnificent thing our species has ever encountered. But let us not rush. There is no hurry here. The universe has been patient for 13.8 billion years. It can certainly wait a little longer while we simply breathe and feel and allow the sheer immensity of what exists to move through us like a slow, warm tide. So let your breath deepen once more. In through the nose, long and easy, and out through the mouth, soft and unhurried. With every exhale, feel the last traces of the day's tension releasing, from your jaw, from the space between your shoulders, from the soles of your feet. You are horizontal. You are still. You are exactly where you need to be, and where you are is already, technically, moving through space at extraordinary speed, riding this planet through its orbit, riding that orbit around the galaxy, riding the galaxy through the local group, and riding the local group through something even larger still. We were speaking of the local group, that family of more than 50 galaxies, spanning 10 million light-years, anchored by the gravitational embrace between the Milky Way and Andromeda. But the local group itself exists within a larger structure, the way a single room exists within a house, and the house within a neighborhood, and the neighborhood within a city that stretches further than the eye can follow. That larger structure is called the Virgo supercluster, and it contains the local group the way an ocean contains a single tide pool, present, belonging, and almost incomprehensibly small within the whole. The Virgo supercluster spans approximately 520 million light-years in diameter. It contains at least 100 galaxy groups and clusters, each one of those clusters itself holding dozens or hundreds of individual galaxies. At the heart of the Virgo supercluster sits the Virgo cluster, a massive, dense congregation of over 1,300 confirmed galaxies, bound together by gravity, pulling gently on everything around them, including, in the most infinitesimal and technical sense, our own little local group. We feel that pull. It is faint and slow across the scales of cosmic time, but it is real. The Virgo cluster is calling us, in its ancient gravitational language, across 65 million light-years of open space. And yet, and this is where things become truly extraordinary, where the architecture of existence reveals yet another layer of breathtaking depth, even the Virgo supercluster is not the final boundary. It is not the largest structure to which we belong. In 2014, a team of astronomers led by R. Brent Tully redrew the map of our cosmic home entirely. Using new techniques to measure the flow of galaxies through space, they revealed that the Virgo supercluster is itself just one lobe, one tendril, one arm of a vastly larger superstructure they named Laniakea, a Hawaiian word meaning, beautifully and perfectly, immeasurable heaven. Laniakea. Say that word quietly in your mind. Let it settle there like something sacred. Immeasurable heaven. That is where you live. That is the name of your home at the largest scale at which a gravitational homeland can be meaningfully defined. Laniakea contains the mass of approximately 100 million billion suns. It spans 520 million light-years across. It holds within it approximately 100,000 galaxies. And every one of those galaxies is itself a city of stars, billions or hundreds of billions of individual suns, each one potentially surrounded by its own family of orbiting worlds, some of them perhaps warm, some perhaps wet, some perhaps alive in ways we cannot yet imagine or detect or understand. 100,000 galaxies. Each galaxy averaging perhaps 200 billion stars. The mathematics involved begin to lose meaning the way a word loses meaning if you repeat it too many times. The numbers become abstract, untethered from anything the human nervous system was designed to process. And that is precisely why we are not going to try to process them tonight. Tonight, we are simply going to feel the edges of these numbers, the way you might stand at the edge of a canyon and not attempt to count every grain of rock within it, but instead simply feel the depth opening beneath you, feel the wind moving through that ancient space, feel how the scale of the thing changes something quiet and fundamental inside of you. Feel that now. Feel the depth opening. You are lying still, and yet you are at the center of a sphere of cosmic awareness that extends in every direction, below you through the Earth, above you through the atmosphere, outward through the solar system, outward through the galaxy, outward through the local group, through the Virgo supercluster, through the vast, flowing tendrils of Laniakea, and then still further, into regions of space so remote that the light traveling from them has been journeying since before our planet existed. All of that is out there, right now, in every direction, simultaneously present and simultaneously ancient, a universe that has no edges we can yet find, no walls we can reach, no boundary where someone has posted a sign reading, "This is where existence ends." As far as our finest instruments can peer, as far as our most powerful telescopes have ever looked, there is always more. There is always another galaxy, another cluster, another filament of structure stretching away into the dark like the root system of some unimaginably ancient and enormous tree. And the deepest image we have ever taken of the cosmos, the Hubble Ultra Deep Field, captured by pointing the Hubble Space Telescope at a tiny, apparently empty patch of sky roughly 1/13 millionth of the total sky's area, a patch no larger than a grain of sand held at arm's length, revealed within that seemingly vacant sliver of darkness approximately 10,000 galaxies. 10,000 entire galaxies, each containing billions of stars, each potentially harboring worlds, in a patch of sky that to the naked eye appears to contain absolutely nothing. Just empty darkness. And yet, with enough patience, with enough light-gathering time, the universe reveals itself as almost incomprehensibly full. Let that image rest behind your closed eyes for a moment. A grain of sand held at arm's length against the night sky, and behind it, 10,000 galaxies. Now multiply that grain of sand across the entire celestial sphere above you, in every direction, and you begin to approach something like the true count of galaxies within our observable universe. Current estimates place that number at approximately 2 trillion. 2 trillion galaxies. The word trillion moves through the mind so quickly, so frictionlessly, that it rarely lands with its proper weight. So let us try, just for a moment, to feel it rather than think it. If you were to count to 1 trillion, one number per second, without stopping, without sleeping, without pausing for a single breath, it would take you approximately 31,700 years. You would need to begin counting before the last ice age ended. You would count through the entire span of recorded human history, through ancient Sumer and Egypt, through Greece and Rome, through the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution and both World Wars and the Space Age and everything that has happened since, and you would still not be finished. You would not even be halfway. And that is just 1 trillion. The observable universe contains 2 of them. 2 trillion galaxies, each a vast, spinning island of stars, hanging in the dark like lanterns in a cathedral whose walls no one has ever seen. Breathe. Just breathe. There is something the mind does when it encounters numbers like these. It goes quiet. A particular kind of quiet that is different from ordinary silence. It is the quiet of genuine awe, the quiet of a perspective so vast that the ordinary concerns and measurements of daily life simply cannot maintain their usual grip. That is what we are cultivating here, in this slow, unhurried journey. Not anxiety in the face of enormity, but peace. The deep, cellular peace that comes from recognizing that you exist within something so staggeringly large, so ancient and complex and beautiful, that your participation in it, however brief, however small by cosmic measure, is nothing short of miraculous. Because here is the extraordinary truth that the universe keeps whispering, in the language of starlight and gravity and deep time. It does not have to contain anything at all. The laws of physics, assembled in even slightly different configurations, would have produced a universe of pure hydrogen gas, or a universe that collapsed back in on itself within fractions of a second, or a universe so smooth and featureless that not a single star, not a single planet, not a single complex molecule could ever have formed. The existence of stars requires a very precise balance between the gravitational force drawing matter together and the expansive pressure pushing it apart. The existence of carbon, the backbone of all known life, required specific nuclear resonances inside stellar cores that only work within extraordinarily narrow ranges. Physicists call these narrow ranges fine-tuning, and whether that fine-tuning reflects something profound about the nature of reality, or something about the vast number of possible universes, or simply the remarkable luck of our own cosmic address, remains one of the deepest and most beautiful open questions in all of human thought. And on that note of open questions, let your own thoughts begin to soften and open as well. Notice how your breathing has slowed without you trying to slow it. Notice how the muscles of your face have released, how your hands have grown heavy and warm. The body knows how to do this. It knows how to let go when the mind steps back from its relentless forward motion and simply allows the present moment to be what it is, vast and quiet, and filled with more wonder than any single lifetime could fully absorb. Above you, right now, in the actual sky beyond your ceiling and your roof and the thin, luminous veil of Earth's atmosphere, photons that have been traveling for billions of years are arriving. Ancient light, born in the cores of stars that burned out long before our sun was formed, is completing journeys of unimaginable length at this very moment, passing through you, through the walls of your room, through the Earth itself, continuing outward on the other side without interruption. You are, at this moment, being gently washed by the oldest light. In the universe, light so ancient it carries the memory of a cosmos that looked nothing like the one we inhabit now. A cosmos without planets, without carbon, without the long, patient chemistry that eventually assembled itself into something capable of looking up and wondering. Pause with that for a moment. Not the wondering itself, but the distance it traveled to arrive here. The sheer, unhurried immensity of the path that ancient light has walked to find you, in this room, in this body, on this particular evening when you chose to be still. There is a concept in astronomy, gentle in its name, staggering in its implications, called the observable universe. It is not the whole universe. It is only the part we can see, the part whose light has had enough time, in the roughly 13.8 billion years since the beginning of everything, to reach us. Think of it as a sphere, centered on Earth, Not because Earth is special or central in any cosmic sense, but simply because Earth is where we are, and light can only travel so far in a finite amount of time. The edge of that sphere, the cosmic horizon, astronomers sometimes call it, lies approximately 46 billion light-years away in every direction. And here is where it becomes difficult for the thinking mind to hold without softening. The universe itself has been expanding the entire time that light has been traveling toward us. Space has been stretching, quietly and continuously, in all directions at once, carrying galaxies with it the way raisins in rising bread are carried apart from one another, not because they are moving through the bread, but because the bread itself is growing. So when we say the observable universe is 46 billion light-years across, we are accounting for that expansion. We are tracing not just the path of ancient light, but the journey of space itself, space that has been quietly, persistently becoming more of itself since the first instant of its existence. Let that settle into you the way warmth settles. Slowly, without effort, beyond our observable horizon, the universe almost certainly continues. The best measurements we have suggest that it continues for an enormous distance, possibly forever. Possibly, the universe is infinite in extent. And infinite is a word we use casually, but it means something almost impossible to truly absorb. It means that everything that can happen does happen. Every configuration of matter and energy that physics permits, every possible arrangement of atoms in every possible form, would occur, not once, but infinitely many times, in the vast dark stretches beyond what any telescope will ever show us. There would be, in an infinite universe, other places where stars very much like our Sun have gathered planets very much like our Earth around them. And on some of those planets, in the logic of infinity, there would be rooms very much like this one. And in those rooms, someone very much like you would be resting in the quiet dark, listening to the hum of their own breathing, feeling the same gentle weight of existence pressing softly down. This is not mysticism. This is mathematics, taken seriously, followed where it leads. And where it leads is into a kind of vertigo, not the frightening kind, but the releasing kind. The kind that loosens the grip. The kind that reminds you that the particular worries you carry, the particular small urgencies of your particular Tuesday or Thursday or Saturday, are held inside something so unimaginably large that largeness itself becomes a strange comfort. Not because your concerns don't matter, they do, profoundly, to the life that is living them, but because there is perspective available here that ordinary waking life rarely offers. A perspective so wide and so deep that it has a physical effect on the body. You may already be feeling it. A release somewhere behind the eyes. A loosening across the shoulders. The jaw unclenching on its own. This is what it does. Genuine contemplation of the cosmos. It does not diminish you. It expands you, gently, to match the scale of what you are already part of. Within our observable universe alone, within that sphere of 46 billion light-years that represents everything we can, even in principle, know, there are an estimated 2 trillion galaxies. 2 trillion. Each one a gravitationally bound collection of stars so dense with light that from the outside they look like single luminous smears against the dark. Each galaxy containing, on average, hundreds of billions of stars. Our own Milky Way, a middling spiral galaxy, nothing remarkable by cosmic standards, holds somewhere between 100 and 400 billion stars. And stars, as we are increasingly understanding, are almost always accompanied by planets. Which means the number of worlds circling suns in the observable universe alone exceeds the number of grains of sand on every beach and desert on Earth. Not by a little, but by orders of magnitude so extreme that the comparison itself becomes poetic rather than mathematical. And yet, in all of that, in all 2 trillion galaxies, in all those hundreds of billions of stars per galaxy, in all those uncountable circling worlds, we have found, so far, Exactly one place where we know for certain that life has arranged itself into a form capable of sitting quietly in the dark and contemplating the whole. One place. This place. Right here, where you are resting now, in your body, beneath your blanket, your chest rising and falling with the same chemistry. That stars themselves began. The carbon in your bones was forged in the cores of ancient suns. The iron threading through your blood was scattered across space by stellar explosions so violent they briefly outshone entire galaxies. You are not separate from the universe looking up at it. You are the universe, having organized itself, over billions of patient years, into something that can look, that can feel the weight of a blanket, that can notice the sound of its own breath moving in the dark. Breathe that in slowly. There is something the astronomers call the cosmic web. It is perhaps the largest structure we know of, a vast, filamentary architecture of dark matter and gas and galaxies that stretches across the observable universe like an impossibly intricate lattice. If you could somehow rise above it all, if you could pull back far enough to see the whole of what we can observe, the universe would not look like a random scattering of light. It would look almost biological. It would look like something grown. The galaxies cluster along filaments, long luminous threads that connect at dense nodes, the way neurons branch and meet in the quiet interior of a living brain. The voids between those filaments, immense, nearly empty regions of space hundreds of millions of light-years across, are dark and cold and vast beyond any easy imagining. And yet even those voids are not truly empty. Lone galaxies drift through them, isolated, far from their neighbors, turning slowly in the dark like thoughts that have wandered from the center of attention. Let your own thoughts do that now, if they need to. Let them drift. There is no urgency here. The cosmic web took shape in the very early universe, seeded by infinitesimal quantum fluctuations, variations so small they existed at the level of the very fabric of space itself, that were then stretched, by the rapid expansion of the early cosmos, to scales large enough for gravity to find and amplify. The universe's grandest architecture, in other words, was written in the language of the smallest possible variations. The map of the largest thing we know emerged from the behavior of the smallest. And if that feels like something more than science, if it feels like it is reaching toward something the mind can sense but not quite name, that feeling is not a mistake. That feeling is what honest attention to reality produces when it is allowed to move without resistance. The Milky Way itself is part of this web. We live in a relatively quiet region, part of a modest cluster of galaxies called the Local Group, which includes our nearest large neighbor, the Andromeda Galaxy, along with several dozen smaller companions. The Local Group is itself part of a larger supercluster, a vast gravitational community of galaxies that astronomers have named Laniakea, a Hawaiian word meaning immeasurable heaven. Laniakea contains the mass of approximately 100 million billion suns, spread across a region 500 million light-years wide. And Laniakea, enormous as it is merely one node among many in the greater structure of the cosmic web. One small gathering in a gathering of gatherings, stretching on in all directions without visible end. Your eyes may be heavy now. That is perfectly right. That is exactly what is meant to happen. There is a particular quality to darkness that changes when you understand what it contains. The dark outside your window tonight is not absence. It is presence, dense with ancient photons, threaded with magnetic fields, laced with the invisible gravitational conversation between everything that has ever had mass. The darkness between stars is not empty silence. It is a medium, filled with hydrogen and helium and complex organic molecules that drift in clouds so vast that our entire solar system would fit inside them without touching the edges. Some of those molecules are amino acids, the very building blocks of proteins, the very first ingredients of life, assembling themselves quietly in the cold between the stars, long before any planet existed to receive them. The universe was already practicing. It was already, in its patient and unhurried way, moving toward complexity, toward chemistry, toward the kind of matter that, given enough time and the right conditions, would begin to do something extraordinary, would begin to replicate itself, to respond to its environment, to metabolize and grow and eventually to move toward the light. Not because anything planned it, not because there was a destination being aimed at, but simply because the laws of physics, carried forward consistently across billions of years, tend in certain conditions to produce structure. And structure, sufficiently complex, tends to produce more structure. And somewhere along that long, unbroken chain of becoming, the universe crossed a threshold that no one can quite locate precisely, the threshold between chemistry and experience, between reaction and feeling, between matter arranged in space and matter that knows it is there. You are that threshold, resting. You are that extraordinary crossing point, grown quiet for the night, letting the deep and impersonal processes of the cosmos carry you forward without effort on your part. Your heart is beating without instruction. Your cells are repairing themselves without supervision. The electrical murmur of your dreaming brain is already beginning to soften at the edges, the sharp boundaries of thought becoming gradual, becoming gradient, becoming something more like weather than like words. Somewhere, right now, a star is being born inside a collapsing cloud of gas and dust, its core temperature climbing toward the ignition point, toward the moment when hydrogen nuclei will find each other with enough force and enough heat to fuse, to become something new, to release energy that has been locked inside matter since the beginning of time. That star does not know it is being born. It has no experience of its own ignition, no awareness of the light it is about to send across unimaginable distances. And yet it will burn for millions, perhaps billions of years, warming whatever orbits it, and when it finally exhausts itself, it will return everything it borrowed back to the galaxy, enriched, transformed, seeded with new elements that did not exist before its long life of burning. Everything the universe makes, it eventually gives back. Everything it borrows, it returns with interest. Let that be a comfort, in whatever quiet way it reaches you. You do not need to hold anything tightly tonight. You do not need to keep track of anything, or protect anything, or carry anything forward by force of will. The universe has been doing this vast, patient recycling of everything into everything else, for longer than the mind can genuinely comprehend, and it will continue doing it long after the particular constellation of atoms that currently calls itself you has returned to the larger conversation. There is something in that continuity that is not loss. Something in it that is, if you allow yourself to feel it without the usual resistance, almost like rest. Not the rest of endings, but the rest of belonging. The rest of knowing, somewhere below the level of language, that you are held inside something that does not drop what it carries. Right now, as your body continues its slow surrender to sleep, the universe outside is not still. It is never still. Galaxies are moving through the cosmic web along paths shaped by the gravity of matter we cannot see, the dark matter that makes up roughly 27% of the universe's total content, invisible to every instrument we have built, detectable only by the gravitational influence it exerts on the things we can see. It bends light from distant galaxies as that light passes near it, creating subtle distortions that astronomers have learned to read the way a physician reads the body, not seeing the thing directly, but inferring its presence from what surrounds it, from the shape of what it touches. We have mapped its distribution. We have traced its filaments. We know in broad outline where it gathers and where it thins. And yet we do not know what it is. Not truly. After decades of searching, after some of the most sensitive experiments ever conducted, detectors buried deep underground to shield them from interference, cooled to temperatures a fraction of a degree above absolute zero to reduce their own thermal noise, we have not yet directly detected a single particle of dark matter. It remains the most abundant component of the universe's structure, and the most mysterious. a vast, invisible architecture upon which everything visible is merely a thin, luminous coating. There is something quietly humbling about that. The universe, even now, is mostly unknown, mostly dark, mostly beyond the reach of our instruments and our theories and our most careful attention. And the response to that, the honest and open response, is not anxiety. It is wonder. It is the same feeling that comes in dreams, when the rules soften and the familiar world reveals unexpected depth, corridors behind familiar walls, skies behind the sky, distances that open where you expected a boundary. You may be drifting now. You may find that the line between listening and dreaming has become less distinct, that the words are arriving like sounds heard through water, present but softened, their edges dissolved. That is exactly right. That is the mind doing what the mind does best when it finally stops insisting on its own alertness. It opens. It floats. It lets the boundary between self and surroundings become negotiable. The light from the Andromeda Galaxy takes approximately 2.537 million years to reach us. When you look at it, on a clear night, away from city lights, it is faintly visible to the naked eye, a soft smear of light in the constellation Andromeda. You are seeing that galaxy not as it is, but as it was when the first members of our genus were learning to shape stone. When the landscape of Earth was populated with creatures we would barely recognize. When the continents stood in configurations subtly different from the ones we know, that light left its source and began its journey. It has been traveling ever since. Through the cold and the dark and the expanding space between galaxies, moving at the only speed it knows, arriving now at the back of your eye on a quiet night, completing a journey so long it makes the whole of human history feel like a single breath. And Andromeda is our neighbor. In cosmic terms, it is practically touching us. The distances to the galaxies beyond it, to the Virgo cluster, to the Great Wall of Galaxies astronomers have traced across a quarter of the sky, to the most distant objects our telescopes have resolved, faint red smears of light from a time when the universe was less than 1 billion years old. Those distances are so much larger that Andromeda, at 2.5 million light-years, feels almost close. Almost intimate. The way a candle feels warm when you are standing in a very large and very dark room. Close enough to see. Close enough to feel something toward. Close enough that the mind can almost wrap itself around the number, can almost hold the 2.5 million years as a real thing rather than an abstraction, before the larger distances arrive and the mind releases its grip entirely, not in defeat, but in something more like relief. The relief of recognizing that some things are simply larger than thought, and that this is not a problem to be solved but a quality to be rested inside of. The most distant object ever observed by human instruments sits at the edge of what we can reach. A galaxy, detected by the James Webb Space Telescope, existing as it was when the universe was approximately 320 million years old. The universe then was nothing like the one we inhabit now. It was smaller, denser, hotter. The first stars were only just beginning to form, massive and unstable and burning through their fuel with a ferocity our own quiet sun has never approached. Those first stars had no planets. There was not yet enough of the heavier elements, the carbon and oxygen and silicon that rocky worlds require, to build them. The universe was still, in those early epochs, almost entirely hydrogen and helium. Everything else, every element that makes chemistry complex, that makes biology possible, that makes the ground solid beneath your feet, had yet to be forged, had yet to be dreamed into existence by the nuclear furnaces burning at the hearts of stars. We are late arrivals, in the deepest sense. The universe had to live several generations of stellar life and death before the raw materials for something like us could even exist. Before the atoms in your body were available to be arranged. Before the particular dance of chemistry and time that eventually produced warm-blooded creatures capable of wondering about warm-blooded creatures was even possible. You are not just the product of evolution, though you are that. You are the product of stellar evolution, of cosmic time, of a universe that had to age and enrich itself, patiently and without hurry, before the ingredients for your particular kind of existence were ready. Feel the weight of your body now against whatever surface is holding you. That weight is gravity, the same force that shaped the cosmic web, that gathered gas into galaxies and galaxies into clusters, that pulled the first clouds of hydrogen together until their cores ignited. The very force that is holding you gently to the earth right now is the same force that built everything you can see when you look at the night sky. There is no separation between the physics of your body and the physics of the universe. The same equations govern both. The same fundamental forces that cause stars to collapse and planets to form cause the atoms of your heart muscle to contract in their precise and rhythmic sequence, over and over, without your supervision, without your permission, without your effort. Your body is doing extraordinary things right now, in the quiet. Things far more complex than anything human engineering has yet produced. And it is doing all of them without asking anything of your conscious mind. You are free, in this moment, to simply be the awareness resting inside the body, the way a passenger rests inside a vessel that knows its own way home. The James Webb Space Telescope, that extraordinary instrument orbiting the Sun nearly 1 million miles from Earth, has changed what we see when we look deep into the universe. Its infrared detectors, cooled to temperatures that make the darkness of space seem warm by comparison, can gather light so ancient and so redshifted, stretched by the expansion of space from visible wavelengths into the infrared, beyond what human eyes could ever detect, that it effectively sees the universe in a register invisible to any biology. It translates the universe's oldest whispers into images. And those images have surprised us. They have shown us galaxies that formed earlier than our models predicted. More structured, more mature, more organized than they should have been at that early age. The universe, it seems, grew up faster than we thought. Which means our models are incomplete. Which means the story we have been telling ourselves about how everything came to be the way it is still has chapters we have not yet read. This is the condition of science, honestly practiced. Not a closed book of settled answers, but an open field of deepening questions, where each answer reveals new questions of greater subtlety, where the horizon moves as you move toward it, always remaining ahead, always pulling the inquiry forward into new and unexpected territory. It is, in that sense, not unlike a dream. Not unlike the way the sleeping mind generates its own visions, internally consistent, emotionally vivid, following a logic that feels entirely real from the inside and reveals its strangeness only from a distance. You may be very close to that territory now. The territory where the voice you are hearing becomes simply a texture, a warmth, a presence at the edge of awareness rather than a sequence of words to be followed and understood. That is a good place to be. That is perhaps the best place. That threshold between the known and the not yet known, between the day's final waking thought and the first gentle image of a dream arriving without announcement, the way stars become visible. Not all at once, but one by one, as the eye adjusts, as the mind releases its grip on the familiar and allows the dark to show what it has always been holding. That is how it begins, again and again, on every clear night that has ever occurred on this world. A single star, then another, then a deepening, a multiplication, a slow revelation of depth that the ancient astronomers called the vault of heaven, as though the sky were a ceiling, solid and fixed, studded with lights the way a throne room might be decorated, everything arranged for the human eye at the center. That was not vanity. That was simply the only geometry available to them. The geometry of standing on the ground and looking up. But now you have another geometry. You have been given, through centuries of patient work, through the accumulated effort of people who stayed awake precisely so that you, tonight, might be able to rest, you have been given a sense of what is actually out there. And it is not a ceiling. It is not a vault. It is an opening and outward extending in every direction simultaneously, a space so large that the word large no longer quite functions the way it should, the way it does when you say a mountain is large, or an ocean, or even a continent. Those are comparisons that the body can make. The universe requires something different from the mind. Something closer to surrender than to measurement. Consider a single, quiet fact. The light arriving at your closed eyelids right now, not the light in the room, but the light that would be falling on you beneath an open sky. That light left its source years ago. In some cases, decades. In some cases, centuries. The star Deneb, which sits near the top of the Northern Cross, is so far away that the light now reaching the Earth departed during the early medieval period, when the great cathedrals of Europe were only beginning to be imagined, when the written histories of most of the world's civilizations were still being composed by hand, by candlelight, by people who had no way of knowing that the photons leaving a blue supergiant star at that precise moment would one day fall on a planet where someone might lie in a darkened room and hear about it as they drifted toward sleep. That light has been traveling for over 1,000 years. It is, in that sense, a message from a time before your language existed. And Deneb is close, by the standards of the galaxy. It is one of our neighbors. It is local. The galaxy itself stretches 100,000 light-years from edge to edge, a span so vast that if you could travel at the speed of light, which is already so fast that you could circle the Earth 7 times in a single second, you would still need 100,000 years to cross it. And the galaxy is one of perhaps 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. 2 trillion. Each one containing hundreds of billions of stars. Each star surrounded, in many cases, by planets. Each planet subject to the same physical laws, the same tug of gravity, the same slow burn of nuclear fire, the same tendency of matter to organize itself into structures of increasing complexity when given enough time and the right conditions. The numbers are too large to feel. This is not a failure of imagination. This is simply the scale operating outside the range where imagination was ever designed to function. Imagination evolved to help you navigate a savanna, to anticipate the behavior of predators, to model the minds of other people in your social group. It was not built for cosmology. And yet here it reaches, here it stretches, here it extends itself past its own comfortable limits and finds something that is not quite comprehension, but is perhaps its near neighbor. Wonder, held very still, like water in a bowl being carried carefully across a long room. There is a region of space called the cosmic web. It is the largest known structure in the universe, a vast arrangement of filaments and voids, galaxy clusters strung along threads of dark matter like beads along a wire, and between the threads, enormous emptiness, regions hundreds of millions of light-years across that contain almost nothing. When astronomers map this structure and you see the images, which you do not need to see now, you can simply feel the shape of it. The cosmic web looks, with startling intimacy, like a network of neurons. Like the branching structure of a brain, viewed from the outside. The filaments of galaxies and the dendrites of a nerve cell are not the same thing, do not share a cause, are separated by a factor of scale so enormous it cannot be written in ordinary notation. And yet they rhyme. They rhyme the way a coastline rhymes with a mountain range, the way a river delta seen from above rhymes with the branching of a tree, the way the universe seems, in its largest expressions, to keep returning to certain shapes, certain patterns, as though it has aesthetic preferences it was never asked about and cannot account for. You are made, it has been said, of star stuff. This is not metaphor, or not only metaphor. The carbon in your cells was forged in the cores of stars that died before the sun was born. The iron in your blood was scattered into space by supernovae that no living thing witnessed. The calcium in your bones, the oxygen in the breath moving slowly through you now as you settle deeper into the surface beneath you, the nitrogen weaving through every protein, the phosphorus threaded into the very architecture of your DNA, all of it older than the Earth itself. All of it borrowed. All of it in the longest sense of the word, returned. You are not visiting the universe. You are a temporary arrangement of it, a local eddy in a river that has been flowing for 13.8 billion years, a brief pattern that the cosmos has made of itself, for reasons that remain, if reasons is even the right word, entirely unclear. And there is something in that, not diminishment, not the cold comfort of being told you are small, but something warmer and stranger than that. Something that has no precise name in any language, but that most people have felt at least once, usually outside, usually at night, usually when the sky was very dark and the stars were very many and the ordinary concerns of the day had gone quiet for a moment, long enough for the older and more patient part of the mind to surface, to look up, and to recognize something it cannot quite articulate. That feeling is real. Whatever it is, wherever it originates, it is not an error. It is not the brain malfunctioning. It may, in fact, be one of the most accurate responses available to a conscious creature standing on a small planet in a mid-sized galaxy, trying to take in the full weight of where it is. The universe is enormous, and you are small, and you are also, by some improbable and unrepeatable chain of events, here, awake within it, capable of knowing that you are here, capable of being moved by the knowing. That capacity, consciousness, awareness, the ability to model the self and the cosmos simultaneously and to feel the tension between them, may be among the rarest things the universe has produced. We do not know how rare. We have looked, carefully, with every instrument available to us, and we have found no other voice answering. The sky, for all its abundance of stars and planets and the raw materials of chemistry, has returned our signals with silence. This may mean we are alone. It may mean that life is common, but that the distances are simply too vast for any signal to have reached us yet, that the conversations are happening but the sound has not arrived. It may mean that consciousness tends, across all possible histories of all possible worlds, to be brief, that it rises and then quiets, that the window during which any civilization is both capable of signaling and inclined to do so is narrow enough that the chances of two such windows overlapping across the span of the galaxy are very small. These are the options that serious thinkers have assembled, and none of them are comfortable, and all of them carry a particular kind of weight that is best felt, perhaps, in the quiet that you are already moving through. The silence of the cosmos has its own texture. It is not the silence of an empty room, which carries the faint residue of recent presence, the sense that someone has just left. It is larger than that. It is the silence of a space that has never required sound, that preceded sound by billions of years, that will continue long after the last frequency has dissipated. Space itself is silent because there is almost nothing in it to carry vibration. The medium through which sound moves is absent across the vast majority of the universe's volume. All of the noise, all of the crashing and burning and colliding and exploding, all of the supernovae and colliding galaxies and jets of plasma screaming outward at near-light speed, all of it happens in complete and perfect silence, from the perspective of any observer not pressed against the surface of something solid. And yet, there is another kind of wave. Gravitational waves, ripples in the fabric of spacetime itself, predicted by Einstein in 1916 and finally detected a century later, in 2015, when two black holes a billion light-years away completed their long spiral inward and merged in an instant that released more energy than all the stars in the observable universe combined, but released it as a tremor in the shape of space rather than as light. And that tremor, after traveling a billion years, arrived at the Earth and moved the detectors by a distance smaller than 1/10,000th the diameter of a proton. It was detected. It was heard, in a sense, converted to sound for human ears. It lasted less than a second, a brief ascending chirp, the universe briefly touching the instruments we had built to feel it. That signal was old when the first animals were climbing out of the oceans. It was already crossing the void when the continents were arranging themselves into shapes your maps would recognize. It arrived, finally, after all of that, after the entire written history of humanity had played out beneath the open sky, and we were ready for it. We had built the ears precisely in time. There is something in that timing that resists easy description, the way a thing you have long anticipated feels, when it finally arrives, both entirely expected and wholly surprising, as though knowing something was coming and experiencing its arrival are two entirely different kinds of knowing, separated by a distance that no amount of preparation can fully close. The universe has a way of doing that, of arriving, of making itself felt at the precise moment when the conditions for feeling it have finally been assembled, after long patience, after long waiting, after the slow accumulation of understanding that makes reception possible. And perhaps that is one way of thinking about what is happening right now, in this quiet, in this particular arrangement of darkness and stillness and the sound of a voice growing softer at the edges. Perhaps this too is a kind of arrival. Not of information, not of data to be processed and filed, but of something closer to presence. The presence of scale. The presence of time. The presence of a universe that has been here, in one form or another, for longer than the mind can genuinely hold, doing what it does without witness, without audience, without any requirement that anyone notice or understand or feel the appropriate weight of it. And yet you are noticing. Even now, even at the threshold of sleep, some part of you is still oriented outward, still faintly attending to the shape of what has been described, the way you might continue to feel the warmth of a fire after your eyes have closed, not seeing it anymore but still held by it, still registered within its radius. That is enough. That is, in fact, a great deal. To carry, even briefly, even in the loosening architecture of a mind approaching rest, some faint impression of how large the container is, that is not nothing. That is perhaps the beginning of a different relationship with the ordinary, with the daylight world, with the sky that will be there again when you wake, smaller looking than it is, closer seeming than it could ever actually be. There is a concept in astronomy called the look-back time. When you observe an object at a great distance, you are not seeing it as it is. You are seeing it as it was, at the moment its light departed. The farther away the object, the further back in time you are looking. The most distant galaxies visible to our instruments appear to us as they were when the universe was only a few 100 million years old, young by any reasonable measure, turbulent, still forming its first large structures, still assembling the conditions that would eventually, billions of years later, allow for stars like the Sun and planets like this one and the particular chain of chemistry that leads, through patience and accident and time, to something lying quietly in a darkened room, breathing slowly, listening. When you look at the night sky with unaided eyes, you are looking back across various distances simultaneously. The moon reflects light that left the sun about 8 minutes ago. The nearest stars are 4 light-years distant, their light a 4-year-old message. The Andromeda Galaxy, faintly visible to the naked eye as a smear of soft light in the autumn sky, is 2.5 million light-years away, meaning the light arriving from it tonight departed before our species existed, before the genus Homo had yet emerged, when the ancestors of human beings were small-brained creatures moving through an African landscape that would be unrecognizable today. That light was already in transit, already crossing the void, before the first stone tool was ever shaped by the first hand that thought to shape it. To look at the sky, then, is always to look backward. The present moment of the universe, whatever is happening right now at the location of every visible star, the actual current state of Andromeda, the true configuration of the galaxies in the deep field, is inaccessible to us by the nature of physics itself. Light is fast, the fastest thing there is, and it is still not fast enough to show us the present. We are perpetually surrounded by the past, layered at different depths, each layer corresponding to a different distance, a different era, a different chapter of the universe's long autobiography. And so the sky is also a kind of library. Not a library you can read sequentially, not one with a table of contents or a logical arrangement of shelves, but one where every direction you turn reveals a different era, a different volume, and where the deepest shelves hold the oldest material, the faint cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang itself, the oldest light in the universe, still traveling, still filling all of space with a whisper of warmth so faint it registers just a few degrees above absolute zero. Detectable only with instruments calibrated to extraordinary sensitivity, and yet present. Present everywhere. Present in every direction. A remnant of the moment, 380,000 years after the beginning, when the universe first became transparent, when the plasma of the early cosmos had cooled enough for electrons to bind to protons and form neutral hydrogen, and light was suddenly free to travel without being immediately reabsorbed, free to move through space the way a sound moves through open air after a door has been opened, spreading outward from that moment in all directions, still spreading, still arriving, still completing a journey that began before any structure in the universe had taken its final form, before the galaxies had gathered themselves from the smooth early dark, before anything had yet condensed into the particular and the local and the named. There is something almost unbearable in that continuity. Not unbearable in the sense of painful, but unbearable in the older sense, too large to be fully borne, too much to be carried all at once without setting some of it down, without allowing parts of it to rest in the periphery of awareness rather than holding all of it at the center simultaneously. The mind moves around it the way the eye moves around a very bright light, approaching, retreating, finding the angles from which it can be appreciated without being overwhelmed. And perhaps that is the correct relationship to have with it. Not mastery, not full comprehension, but a willingness to remain in its vicinity, to let its scale be felt in intervals, to allow the enormity to arrive in portions rather than demanding it all at once. The universe does not require your full attention. It has been proceeding without it for a very long time. What it offers, when you turn toward it in moments like this one, in the particular openness that comes with late hours and near sleep and the loosening of the day's accumulated urgencies, is something closer to perspective than to knowledge. A reorientation. A gentle reminder of proportion that carries no judgment with it, that does not diminish the concerns of the day but simply places them within a larger frame, the way stepping back from a painting allows you to see how each brushstroke relates to all the others, how the small and urgent details resolve, at sufficient distance, into something that has a shape, a mood, a coherence that was invisible from close up. You are at sufficient distance now, or nearly. The concerns are quieting. The frame is widening. Somewhere in the region between waking and sleeping, the mind performs its own version of this, releases the particular, relaxes its grip on the detailed and the immediate, and allows something broader and less defined to take its place. Images without narrative. Feeling without object. A sense of motion that carries no destination. This is the beginning of what the brain does in its own private dark, and it is not entirely different from what the universe has always been doing in its own, generating, transforming, moving through states, following laws that are consistent without being gentle, precise without being purposeful, beautiful without having intended to be. Dark matter moves through you right now. Billions of particles per second, if the current models are correct, passing through your body, through the walls of this room, through the earth beneath you, interacting with ordinary matter so weakly that they might as well be ghosts, detectable only by their gravitational influence on the things around them, never directly seen, never caught, catalogued by their effects rather than their presence. The rotation of galaxies suggests they are there. The bending of light around massive clusters confirms that something invisible is doing the bending. The large-scale structure of the universe, that cosmic web of filaments and voids, could not have formed the way it did without a scaffolding of matter that neither emits nor absorbs light. It is there, abundant, 5 times more prevalent than the ordinary matter that makes up everything you have ever touched or seen or tasted, and yet it remains at the edge of knowing, defined more by what it does not do than by what it is. Dark energy is stranger still. It is not a thing, exactly, not a particle or a field in any conventional sense, but rather a property of space itself, a tendency of the vacuum to expand, an energy inherent in emptiness that drives the acceleration of the universe's growth. The galaxies are not merely moving apart in the way that debris from an explosion moves apart, slowing as gravity works against the initial momentum. They are accelerating. The space between them is stretching faster and faster, driven by something that makes up roughly 68% of everything that exists and that remains, even now, almost entirely mysterious. We have a name for it. We have measurements of its effects. We have equations that accommodate it. What we do not have is any genuine understanding of what it is, where it comes from, why it has the strength it has, or what it will eventually mean for the long future of the universe, a future in which, if the current acceleration continues, the distant galaxies will eventually be receding from us faster than light can cross the growing distance, and the observable universe will shrink, slowly, over timescales so vast they make the current age of the cosmos seem like a single morning, until the Milky Way and its few gravitationally bound companions exist in a darkness unrelieved by any external light, the rest of the universe having passed beyond the horizon of the knowable, unreachable, invisible, gone not by destruction but by distance, not by ending but by the quiet and patient expansion of the space between one thing and another. And in that silence, in that profound and final isolation, there would be no one left to remember that the universe had once been crowded with light, no telescope capable of detecting the faint echo of galaxies now forever beyond reach, no signal arriving from the outer dark to suggest that anything else had ever existed at all. It is a strange kind of loneliness to contemplate, not the loneliness of a single being adrift, but the loneliness of an entire civilization, an entire species, an entire galaxy, surrounded by nothing but the slow cooling of its own stars, the patient dimming of its own fires, with no way of knowing, and no way of ever knowing, that the universe beyond its horizon had once been as full and luminous as a summer night seen from a mountain above the clouds. The knowledge would simply be gone. Not destroyed. Not erased by violence. Simply left behind, like a name carved into driftwood carried out by a tide that never returns. But that future is not yet. We are living still in the early brightness of the universe's long life, in an era so cosmically young that stars are still being born in abundance, galaxies are still colliding and merging in slow-motion dances of unimaginable scale, and the night sky above us holds within it, even now, more photons than can ever be meaningfully counted, each one a message from a source so distant that the light left its origin before the Earth existed, before the sun had ignited, before the solar nebula had begun to collapse under its own quiet and inevitable weight. Consider what it means to look up. Consider what that simple act contains. Every photon that touches the surface of your eye has traveled, in perfect and undeviating straightness, across distances that have no reasonable analog in human experience. The light from the Andromeda Galaxy, the farthest thing visible to the naked eye on a clear, dark night, left its source 2.5 million years ago, when our ancestors were still learning the shape of stone, when the landscape of Earth looked almost nothing like it does today, when the very concept of a thinking creature looking up and wondering had not yet fully arrived. That light crossed the intergalactic void, navigated the space between two spiral systems, entered the atmosphere of a planet that did not yet know it was being visited, and arrived, finally, at the surface of your eye. You received it. You completed its journey. The universe, in some small and quiet way, looked at itself through you. And Andromeda is close, by the standards of the cosmos. It is our nearest large neighbor, bound to us by gravity, destined to merge with the Milky Way in approximately 4.5 billion years, a collision that will not destroy the stars within either galaxy, because the space between stars is so vast that even when two galaxies interpenetrate, individual stars almost never collide, but rather pass through one another like two swarms of fireflies merging in a summer field, the gravitational tides reshaping both into something new, something without the elegant spiral arms of their current forms, something rounder and older and quieter, an elliptical galaxy slowly exhausting its gas, slowly ceasing to produce new stars, settling into the long and dignified senescence that follows the passionate youth of star formation. Beyond Andromeda, the distances grow so quickly that language begins to fail its duties. The Virgo cluster of galaxies lies some 50 to 60 million light-years away, a great gravitational hub around which our own local group orbits, slowly and at immense remove, drawn toward its center of mass over timescales that dwarf the recorded history of every civilization that has ever existed on this planet combined. The Virgo supercluster, of which we are a peripheral member, stretches across roughly 110 million light-years of space and contains within its boundaries approximately 100 galaxy groups and clusters, each of those clusters containing dozens to thousands of individual galaxies, each galaxy containing hundreds of billions of individual stars, each of those stars a sun, burning in the dark, warming whatever orbits it with the steady and indifferent generosity of nuclear fire. And yet the Virgo supercluster is itself a tributary, a branch, a local feature within something larger still. In 2014, astronomers using the movements of galaxies, their peculiar velocities, their gravitational drift toward shared attractors, mapped the true superstructure of our cosmic neighborhood and found that we belong to a supercluster they named Laniakea, a Hawaiian word meaning immeasurable heaven. Laniakea contains the Virgo supercluster as one of its smaller components. It spans 500 million light-years from edge to edge. It contains the mass of 100 million billion suns distributed across approximately 100,000 galaxies. It is shaped like a watershed, like a river basin, with long filaments of galaxies flowing down gravitational gradients toward a central region called the Great Attractor, a zone of immense gravitational influence whose exact nature remains partially obscured by the plane of our own galaxy, hidden behind the dust and stars of the Milky Way itself, so that the very gravitational center pulling us forward across cosmic time is something we cannot fully see, cannot fully measure, a presence known by its effects rather than its face, felt in the slow and steady drift of 100,000 galaxies toward something they cannot see but cannot resist, the way water finds a sea without knowing the sea exists, without intention, without awareness, moved only by the patient geometry of gravity working across distances so large that the movement itself is imperceptible on any human timescale, visible only when centuries of observation are compressed into a single image, a single map, a single quiet realization that everything is going somewhere, that the universe is not static, not still, not a fixed and permanent arrangement of matter hanging in darkness, but a living structure, breathing in its own way, flowing, falling, organizing itself according to rules so deep and so ancient that they were written into the fabric of existence before the first atom had fully formed. And when we pull back further still, when we allow the mind to ascend beyond Laniakea, beyond even the scale at which superclusters become visible as individual objects, we find something that stops the breath entirely. We find the cosmic web. It is perhaps the largest coherent structure in the known universe, a filamentary network of matter stretching across the entire observable cosmos, a three-dimensional lacework of galaxy filaments and walls and voids so enormous that individual superclusters, each containing hundreds of thousands of galaxies, appear as mere beads threaded along its strands. The filaments are highways of matter, long luminous threads where gravity has drawn gas and dust and dark matter and galaxies into elongated structures hundreds of millions of light-years in length. Between them lie the voids, vast, almost empty regions of space where very little matter has gathered, where the darkness is deeper and more complete than anywhere else in the universe, spherical absences in the web that can span 300 million light-years or more, cosmic bubbles of near-nothingness surrounded by the luminous scaffolding of everything else. Seen at the largest scales, the observable universe resembles nothing so much as a living tissue, a neural network, a brain rendered in light and time, with the filaments as axons carrying information, the galaxy clusters as nodes where connections concentrate, and the voids as the spaces between thoughts, silent and necessary, giving shape to what surrounds them. This resemblance is not lost on the scientists who study it, though they are careful to note that it is a resemblance only, a coincidence of form produced by very different underlying processes. And yet the coincidence carries a certain weight, A certain quiet invitation to wonder whether complexity at the largest scales and complexity at the most intimate scales might share something more than appearance, whether the universe has a tendency toward pattern that repeats itself across orders of magnitude, whether the same mathematics that governs the branching of a river delta governs also the branching of a filament of galaxies, not because the universe is trying to say something, but simply because certain geometries are more stable, more efficient, more deeply woven into the nature of space and gravity and time than others. The observable universe contains, by current estimates, roughly 2 trillion galaxies. That number was revised dramatically upward in 2016, when a team of astronomers used deep field images and models of galaxy evolution to conclude that previous estimates had accounted for only a fraction of the galaxies that exist within the horizon of what we can see, the rest being too small, too faint, too far dissolved into the background glow to have been individually catalogued. 2 trillion galaxies, each one a civilization of stars, each star a possible sun, each sun a possible warmth falling on possible water on a possible world where something might be listening to the silence and finding it, as we do, simultaneously empty and full, terrifying and tender, cold with distance and yet somehow intimate, as if the universe, for all its scale, has arranged itself in such a way that a small creature on a small planet in a peripheral arm of an ordinary galaxy can look outward and see almost to the beginning of time itself. Because that is what we do when we look into deep space. We do not merely see distance. We see the past. We see time laid open like the pages of a book left in the light, each layer of distance corresponding to an earlier chapter of cosmic history, so that the most distant objects visible to our finest instruments are not the universe as it is, but the universe as it was, nearly 14 billion years ago, when it was young and hot and dense and everything was different, when the first stars were only beginning to ignite in the darkness, massive and brief and brilliant, forging in their cores the first heavy elements that would eventually become planets and oceans and the iron in your blood and the calcium in your bones. Looking out is looking back. The telescope is a time machine. The observable universe is not a snapshot of the present, but a four-dimensional record of everything that has happened since the light now reaching us first began its journey, a fossil record written not in stone but in photons, not in layers of sediment but in layers of redshift, each wavelength stretched by the expansion of the space it has crossed, each stretching a measure of how long the light has traveled, how much the universe has grown, how far we are from the moment when all of this began. And that beginning, that first instant of existence, is itself one of the deepest and most carefully studied mysteries in all of science, a boundary at which our equations soften and our certainties dissolve, and the mind arrives at the edge of what is currently knowable and stands there, not in defeat, but in something closer to reverence, looking out over the territory that lies beyond the reach of what we have so far been able to see or measure or describe with confidence. We call it the Big Bang, though the name is in some ways misleading. It was not an explosion in the conventional sense, not a detonation of matter hurled outward through pre-existing space, but rather the beginning of space itself, the beginning of time itself, a moment, if moment is even the right word for something that preceded the existence of duration, when everything that now exists was compressed into a state of such extreme density and temperature that the physics we use to describe the ordinary universe no longer applies, when the four fundamental forces of nature may have been unified into a single force, when the distinction between matter and energy had not yet fully resolved itself, when the universe was not a place but a process, not a container but a becoming, not something that existed somewhere but something that was, in that first unimaginable instant, everything that would ever be. From that state of infinite compression, space expanded. Not into anything. Not outward through some larger pre-existing void. Simply expanded, the distances between points increasing, the temperature falling as the volume grew, the energy of the primordial fireball cooling by degrees so rapid that within the first second the universe had already passed through phases of existence that have no analog anywhere in the cosmos today, phases visible only in particle accelerators built by human hands to recreate, in tiny and local and briefly sustained ways, the conditions of those first instants, those first fractions of a second in which the story of everything that would ever exist was written in the language of quarks and leptons and the bosons that carry the forces between them. Within the first 3 minutes, the universe had cooled enough for protons and neutrons to combine into the first atomic nuclei, hydrogen and helium and traces of lithium, the 3 lightest elements, the raw material from which the first stars would eventually condense. For the next 380,000 years, the universe remained opaque, a plasma so dense that light could not travel freely through it, scattered continuously by the charged particles that filled all of space, so that the cosmos was bright but unseeable, luminous but not yet transparent, full of energy moving in all directions and finding no clear path through the fog of its own heat. And then, as the temperature fell to approximately 3,000 degrees, something changed. The electrons slowed enough to be captured by the nuclei, forming the first neutral atoms, and in that moment, that long, slow, extended moment spread across thousands of years, the universe became transparent. The light that had been trapped in the plasma was suddenly free, and it streamed outward in all directions, filling the cosmos with a flash of brilliant radiation that has been traveling ever since, cooling as it goes, stretched by the expansion of space from the wavelengths of visible light into the microwave frequencies we now detect with radio telescopes as the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the universe, the afterglow of the moment when space first became clear, a signal so ancient and so pervasive that it arrives from every direction equally, a whisper from the very edge of the visible past, a remnant of the universe's first great transformation. We have mapped that light with extraordinary precision. We have measured its temperature, which is now just 2.7 degrees above absolute zero, and found it uniform to 1 part in 100,000, with tiny fluctuations that correspond to the slight variations in density that were present in the early universe, the seeds from which all subsequent structure grew, the gravitational starting points around which matter began to clump and gather and eventually collapse into the first stars and the first galaxies and the long chain of stellar generations that led, across billions of years of cosmic time, to the formation of our Sun and our solar system and the particular arrangement of circumstances that allowed, on one small world, for chemistry to become biology and biology to become consciousness and consciousness to become curiosity and curiosity to become the kind of creature that builds telescopes and points them at the oldest light in the universe and reads in its faint fluctuations the story of everything that came before. That is not a small thing. That is, perhaps, the most remarkable thing that can be said about the cosmos. Not its size, not its age, not the number of its galaxies or the violence of its processes or the strangeness of its dark constituents, but the fact that it has, in at least one place and possibly in countless others scattered across its incomprehensible volume, produced something capable of looking back at it, capable of measuring the light of its first moments, capable of asking not only what the universe is but why it is, and whether the question itself means anything at all in a cosmos that preceded meaning by billions of years, that existed in its fullness and its fire long before there was any mind to receive it, any awareness to register the beauty of a galaxy or the silence between stars or the pale curve of a planet seen from the darkness of space. The universe did not need us to be what it is. It was vast before we arrived. It will be vast long after we are gone. And yet here we are, inside it, made of it, looking at it, and finding in that looking something that feels, against all reasonable expectation, like recognition. There is a concept in cosmology that carries within it more philosophical weight than almost any other idea in the whole of science. It is called the anthropic principle, and in its most careful formulation it states simply that the universe we observe must be compatible with the existence of observers, because if it were not, there would be no one to observe it. It is a tautology, in one sense, a circular statement that seems at first to say very little. But beneath its surface lies something more unsettling, more generative, more difficult to fully absorb. Because when we examine the physical constants of the universe, the strength of gravity, the mass of the electron, the value of the cosmological constant, the ratio of electromagnetic force to gravitational force, we find that they are exquisitely, almost impossibly, fine-tuned for the existence of complexity. Change any one of them by even a small amount, and the universe that results would be one in which stars cannot form, or cannot sustain nuclear fusion long enough to produce heavy elements, or in which atoms themselves are unstable, or in which the cosmos recollapses in a fraction of a second before any structure can emerge at all. The universe, in other words, appears to be calibrated for life, or at least for the kind of physical complexity that life requires. Whether this reflects a deeper design, a selection effect among an enormous number of possible universes, each with different constants, a mathematical necessity we have not yet understood, or simply the kind of coincidence that seems remarkable only because we are the ones doing the noticing, these are questions that science alone cannot yet answer, questions that live at the boundary between physics and philosophy and something older than either, the ancient human hunger to know not just how the world works, but why it is the way it is and not some other way entirely. The multiverse hypothesis offers one possible answer, or at least one possible framework for thinking about the question. If our universe is not the only one, if the Big Bang that produced our cosmos was one of an enormous or perhaps infinite number of such events, each producing a universe with its own physical laws and constants, its own geometry and content and fate, then the fact that we find ourselves in a universe hospitable to complexity is no more surprising than the fact that we find ourselves on a planet hospitable to life. In a large enough ensemble of possibilities, every combination will eventually be realized somewhere, and the observers will naturally find themselves in the subset of realizations that permit their existence. The multiverse does not explain the fine-tuning so much as dissolve it, reframe it, place it in a context so large that the improbability fades into inevitability. But the multiverse, if it exists, is by definition beyond our ability to directly observe or test. The other universes, if they are there, are separated from ours not merely by distance, but by the kind of boundary that no signal and no instrument can cross, making the hypothesis one that lives, at least for now, at the edge of what science can properly address, where the tools of empiricism begin to give way to the tools of inference and mathematical beauty and the deep intuition of those who have spent their lives studying the architecture of physical law. It is not a comfortable place to stand, this edge, but it is an honest one, and the willingness to stand there without pretending to certainties that do not yet exist is itself a form of intellectual integrity that the universe seems, in some quiet way, to reward with deeper and more intricate questions. And so we return, always, to the sky, to the simple and ancient act of looking up, to the darkness between the stars that is not empty but full, not silent but saturated with radiation and fields, and the slow drift of matter across scales that defeat all ordinary imagination, to the light arriving from distances so great that the sources may no longer exist in the form that produced it, the galaxies that sent those photons perhaps already merged, transformed, their stars evolved and cooled and darkened in the time the light spent crossing the void. We look at the past and call it the present sky. We look at the edge of the observable universe and call it a horizon, knowing that beyond it the cosmos continues, unobserved and vast and indifferent and real, stretching outward in all directions without a center, without an edge, without any privileged position from which the whole can be surveyed, so that every point in the universe is, in the only meaningful sense, its own center, its own still point around which everything else recedes, its own quiet origin of an infinite and unreachable horizon. You are the center of your observable universe, not because you are special in any way the cosmos has chosen to acknowledge, not because the laws of physics bend toward you or the stars arrange themselves for your benefit, but because observation itself creates a sphere, and you are always at the middle of the sphere your senses can reach, surrounded equally in all directions by the ancient light still arriving from the edge of what can be seen, held gently at the center of your own private cosmological horizon, a horizon that moves with you. Wherever you go, that no one else occupies in quite the same way, that is yours not by privilege but by the simple and extraordinary fact of your being here, being conscious, being the kind of thing that can receive light and convert it into meaning. And the meaning, when it comes, arrives quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not descend in a moment of sudden illumination or resolve itself into a clean and satisfying answer. It settles instead, like dust after a long disturbance, slowly, in layers, over years of returning to the same questions and finding them deeper each time, finding that the universe does not yield its nature to impatience but rewards the slow and sustained attention, the willingness to sit with uncertainty without demanding that it resolve itself on a human schedule, without insisting that the cosmos owe us the comfort of comprehension. What we know is extraordinary enough. We know that the universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old, and that within that span of time it has expanded from a state of unimaginable density into a structure containing 2 trillion galaxies, each one a world of stars, the whole of it threaded together by the invisible architecture of dark matter and driven apart by the invisible pressure of dark energy, 2 constituents of reality that together make up roughly 95% of everything that exists and that remain, despite decades of intensive study, fundamentally mysterious, known by their effects and not their nature, felt but not seen, measured but not understood, like a wind that moves the grass and bends the trees but has no visible form of its own. We know that the atoms in your body were forged in the interiors of stars that lived and died before the sun was born, that the iron in your blood was produced in the final moments of a stellar life so massive that its death released more energy in seconds than our sun will produce across its entire 10 billion year existence, that you are, in the most literal and unmetaphorical sense, made of the universe looking at itself, matter that has organized itself across billions of years of cosmic and biological evolution into a form capable of wondering about its own origin. That is not poetry. That is chemistry and astrophysics and the long patient work of time. We know that light travels at just under 300,000 kilometers per second, and that even at that speed it takes 8 minutes to reach us from the sun, 4 years to reach us from the nearest star, 2.5 million years from Andromeda, and over 13 billion years from the most distant objects we have ever detected, so that the act of looking at the night sky is an act of time travel so profound that the entire recorded history of human civilization occupies only an eye blink at its near end, a vanishing fraction of the journey that the oldest light has made to reach us. We know that the universe will continue long after the last star has burned out, long after the last black hole has evaporated in a slow hiss of Hawking radiation across timescales so vast they require exponents to express, long after the last organized structure has dissolved into a thin and cooling soup of particles moving apart in a darkness so complete and so uniform that time itself becomes almost meaningless. Because time is only distinguishable from eternity when something changes, and in the far future of the universe, nothing will change, nothing will happen, and the long dream of existence will continue without content, without event, a silence so deep it circles back around to something almost like peace. But that end is not yet. The stars are still burning. The galaxies are still turning. Somewhere in the darkness, light is leaving a source it will take billions of years to cross, and it is already on its way, already traveling, already carrying within its oscillating fields the information of a place and a moment that nothing else will ever know. And here, on this small and improbable world, wrapped in a thin skin of air, warmed by an ordinary star in a quiet arm of one galaxy among 2 trillion, something woke up and looked outward and felt the scale of it and did not turn away. The universe is vast beyond the reach of language, ancient beyond the reach of intuition, strange beyond the reach of easy comfort. And yet it is also, in every atom of your body, intimate. It is the ground you stand on and the air you breathe and the light that falls on your closed eyes and the slow rhythm of your breathing as you rest, as you let the question settle, as you allow the immensity to hold you the way the darkness holds the stars, not by grasping, not by explaining, but simply by being everywhere around them, patient and vast and still.